So my name is Dr. McKinney, and I'm the co-founder of Cortex. And today I'm really excited to share with everyone some of the progress that our company has made since last time we had the privilege of presenting to Discovery Labs. So I don't think it's really much of a surprise to anyone that burnout is quite a big problem in our society right now, particularly when it enters in the workforce. But to give you a sense of the economic scale of this problem, one study estimated that the typical Canadian company pays about $3,800 per employee per year in lost productivity due to mental health related reasons. So there's both a moral and a financial imperative to really get a handle on this problem. And unfortunately, the transition to a virtual workforce as a result of the pandemic has really challenged industry's ability to handle this problem. Whereas before they could check in with people, this is no longer quite as viable. We talked with one manager at a large corporation that got this quote where she wasn't sure whether or not it was okay to push her team towards higher performance, or if in fact it was her team just needed a little bit of time to recover. So in order to address this issue, Cortex is developing an app in order to gamify the process of collecting the mental wellness data necessary to answer these questions for individual employers. So as you can see right here, I've got a demo of the app that's currently available up online. And from my research experience, I knew that collecting this kind of data can be fairly tedious, to say the least. So we really tried to focus on making a gamified user experience to make collecting this information more fun and engaging. So you can see we have things like emojis, little animations to try to spice it up a little bit. So here you can track individual variables where we can use to get a holistic sense of what your mental health might be at any particular time, as well as lifestyle events that might be important for understanding your status. But the key innovation that we have is this a game that allows us to measure your cognitive capacity, your attention specifically, based on inferences from your reaction time. And when we talked with both managers as well as individual employees, they said that when surveys are sent out in order to check on employees' wellness, oftentimes there's not a lot of honesty because people are scared that that information could be used against them in some capacity. So we believe that using this more objective cognitive-based style of assessment will let us get more true and honest information about where people are at so that we can make the most informed decisions. And then after people have used the app a few times, then they can start looking at the analytics from their data to try to get a sense of what their own personal burnout risk factors are. So example, here you can see some fluctuations in my performance on the game, as well as the other variables that you can track and see where there might be correlations and interrelations between the two. And the hope is that people will be able to start identify what their own burnout triggers are so they can start responding proactively as opposed to reactively in order to mitigate their burnout risk. And then the analytics that we're developing will be able to automate that process and make it more scalable and efficient. And we believe that this technology, when put in the hands of both individual employees as well as managers in companies, will be able to improve job satisfaction by reducing burnout. And as a result, this should decrease absenteeism in the workplace, which will translate into greater productivity over the long term, in addition to addressing that moral need that I previously alluded to. To get into our business model a little bit, we started off as a social enterprise where we want to make sure that there was at least a limited free version of our technology available for everybody in order to do some benefit in the community. However, we can still monetize our our B2C market by offering premium memberships for exclusive access to content as well as new analytic features that we implement. And then on the B2B end of it, we can formalize that content into educational workshops for companies to teach them about the neuroscience of how to manage burnout and be inclusive in the workplace. And I'll give some examples of this in just a moment. And then what I think is perhaps even more cool is because we're able to collect this data, we can actually use this for assessment purposes in order to give people and companies a sense of where they're at. So one of the current features that we're able to offer is personality assessments, where we can take a couple people and identify where their personalities may line up, where they may diverge in order to identify potential areas where there might be tension. And we can do this for both pairs as well as for entire teams in order to hopefully develop a sense of empathy and appreciation of our strengths and diversity with each other. Our workshop topics themselves range from a number of different individual ones, from the basic science levels to more applied end, but they're broadly around how can we improve workplace wellness using both evidence-based and scientific approaches. In particular, some of our more flagship topics are looking at how to be more inclusive as it relates to mental health challenges, specifically anxiety, ADHD, and depression, since those are some of the most common challenges that people experience that tend to sneak themselves into the workplace. Based on the workshops we've been able to do so far, we've gotten very good reception. Approximately 88% of our participants say that they're very easy to follow. 69% of them say that they were very useful. And we were using our app as an interactive learning tool to help link these topics and the content with their individual data and the experiences linked within that. And people rated, even if it's rudimentary beta stage, 54% of people rated our app as being a helpful learning tool towards that. Thinking about the market opportunity that this presents, the corporate wellness industry has an estimated total addressable market of about 57 billion American dollars, with a compound annual growth rate of 6.5%. And we believe that we'd be able to capture 2% of this in order to get a $1.7 million annual revenue. However, thinking a little bit more short term, though, we really want to focus a little bit more closer to home and working with Alberta's growing tech sector. So namely all the professionals that are going to be coming to Alberta and graduating from our post-secondary institutions. They're going to be looking for ways to get personalized burnout support that are both cost effective given some of the challenges that are on the current mental health support system. And then we'll be able to provide the same value towards professional service companies like accountants, marketing, finance, as well as tech companies. Since this sector tends to have some of the highest costs of burnout due to their workforce primarily being knowledge workers, where a lost day of work due to lack of focus can really interrupt the plans and direction for that team. Thinking about our IP protection, we're using a multi-pronged strategy. So the content that we're putting in the workshops themselves can be copyrighted as a way to protect those. And then the gamification strategy that we're using will be protected using a trade secret, leveraging both NDAs as well as non-compete agreements with our employees. And after we collect enough data in order to build a proper burnout prediction model with machine learning, some artificial intelligence, we'll be able to patent that and the process as a way to properly secure our IP as we prepare for VC investment. Thinking about our competitors, there's a few other people within the space, but really our biggest competitor is the status quo. So people's existing benefits package. And as you can see, we have a number of advantages over the status quo as far as that goes. Within the B2C space, there's a number of wellness apps, Headspace perhaps being one of the most well-known that we're somewhat of an indirect competitor with. But we do provide advantages above and beyond them, namely in the documentation and analytics that we can provide. And that core competitive advantage, our theory-based analytics, is what gives us a cutting edge over our B2B competition as well. Orgam AI and Headversity are other companies here in Calgary who are working in doing burnout prevention as well as resiliency within companies. But from my understanding, their analytic approach uses machine learning that just requires large data sets, but doesn't have the same science-based theory-driven approach to try to particularly articulate when someone is at risk for burnout using time series approaches. However, I could not be executing this all on my own. So I'm really grateful to have my team as a strong source of support. So while the ideas and the technologies in many ways developed by myself, my co-founder Shannon helped take those ideas and turn them into a business plan. And then Eden and Araz are two developers that were instrumental in helping us take our the business plan and make the demo that you previously saw. Thinking about where we came from and where we're going, to date we've been able to raise $75,000 of non-dilutive funding in order to support the development of our app. And we've been able to secure our first early adopter contractor with Startup Lloyd Minister and Ekerin for a limited series of burnout management workshops that we're hoping to continue doing with other organizations and companies. And this is leading up to the full launch of our workshops and consulting services this winter. Looking forward to 2022, we'll continue to beta test and iterate our user experience, since that's going to be one of the core features that brings people back towards getting the data necessary to launch our burnout prediction services in fall 2022. And then briefly before I wrap up, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to me. And based on the expertise that's in the room, we would really appreciate some feedback as it relates to our pricing, as well as any opportunities for other early adopters might be interested in working with us to level up their mental wellness strategy, as well as guidance on preparing a data room for VC investment within the next 2 years.
Thanks, Ty. Since we are just kind of at the end of your time here, I'll just have a couple quick questions. If anyone has any comments for Ty about his questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Michael, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, you can go ahead.
Sure, Ty, I love what you do. I think it's great. I'm just wondering about the name 8-bit Cortex, and you're trying to, I guess, market this to your customers. How are they responding to that name? It's fun, but I'm a scientist. But how about the people who are buying?
So far, what we've gotten is that there's a bit of an intrigue around it. People are curious to learn a little bit more. So it's worked well from us in that way. Based on some of our customer validation research with our logo and stuff like that, and our brand, we give off the appearance of a medical tech company. So that's kind of where we originally came from, where we'd like to go. But the workplace wellness angle will allow us to reach market first in order to develop our technology.
Yeah, if you're going mass market and you want to get onboarding a large number of people, it might be a little bit more of a challenge. I guess in terms of your customers that don't pay, how much work do you have to do to support them? How much do they actually cost in your cost model? Are they really free? And can you afford to grow laterally hugely?
That's a really good question. So right now, I believe our operating costs for web services are about $100 a month. So we'll be able to scale reasonably well over the next while based on the non-dilutive funding that we've acquired. But that's why it's really critical for us to start getting more sales for the B2B side of our business model, because basically we want to use that in order to subsidize the expansion of our digital services. So that way we can always be able to ensure that we can offer it to the community, which then in turn enhances our ability for our technology to service our corporate clients as well.
Yeah, presumably you want to focus on the clients that have the most profit margin at this stage, so that you can use that to help you grow and scale initially. So is that the B2B, I guess, is the primary? Yeah.
Yes, and then specifically within that, focusing on tech companies, as well as other companies that offer professional services, since they tend to have the highest risks and costs associated with burnout between turnover, absenteeism, presenteeism, and just large cost mistakes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, good. Thanks.
Thank you. Just before we go to our last speaker, I'll give you the chance to answer one more question. I actually had one for you. I was wondering, with how subjective mental health kind of is for everyone, do you have any data on how accurate your app is in comparison to some of the other apps on the market that you mentioned?
Yeah, so we're still trying to acquire the data in order to do that initial psychometric validation. But what I can say is that we're using a normative data approach to try to always make sure that we're comparing people to similar areas. So I think the best way to go about that is thinking about the personality test. It makes most sense to compare people to your local community rather than the people from across the world. So that's one way that we can always ensure that no matter what our stage of development, we're always doing as good of a data-driven approach as we can to ensure that as much subjectivity is removed and it's as fair comparison as possible.